Okay, hello and welcome. If you're watching this, it means that you've purchased the Realistic Watercolor Pack, so thank you so much for your order, and let's get into how to use your new brushes. So to start, your brushes come with paper textures and color palettes, so let's talk about how to use the paper textures. To import the paper texture, you're first going to locate the file containing your paper texture images. From here, you're going to select the texture you want to work with, and just simply drag it and drop it onto your Photoshop canvas. And from here, you're going to adjust the paper texture to cover your entire canvas. Once it covers your whole canvas, you can select Done, and then we're going to open up the Layers panel. So once you got the Layers panel open, you're going to select your paper texture layer, and you're simply going to click on this drop-down menu and change the blend mode from normal to linear burn. Now create a layer underneath that texture, and you'll see that anything you draw will have the same texture as that paper, and it'll make it look like you are drawing directly on paper. You can also change the blend mode to multiply or to color burn. With color burn, the paper texture will only show up on areas with color, and with multiply, it has a similar effect to linear burn, but it really is just going to come down to personal preference, and my favorite is always linear burn. So if you don't know what to choose linear burn. Next, let's talk about how to import your brushes. So to open up your brush library, you're going to select this brush icon and then choose this drop-down menu. And then from here, you can select your brushes. Now, if you don't have them imported yet, click on this gear icon and select Import Brushes. From here, you'll locate your Realistic Watercolor file, and then you're just going to simply select the .abr files and click Open, and then they will show up on the bottom of your brush library, and you'll be able to access them here. The swatches work pretty much the same way. Select Window and Swatches to open up that folder, and to import your swatches, click this button here and then select Import Swatches, and you'll do the same thing. You'll just locate the file, select it, and it'll show up here at the bottom of your swatches folder. Okay, let's get into how to use each brush. So I'm going to open up the sketch while we're testing so I can show you how these work. So the first brush in our brush library is going to be the Outline Work Brush. Now the Outline Work Brush is a completely solid brush with really smooth lines. It's pressure sensitive, so the lighter you touch, the thinner your line will be, and the harder you press down, the bigger it will be. I like to start it by using a medium pressure and then pressing down harder where I want it to be bigger, and then I'll use barely any pressure at all to finish the line and get a little bit of a tip there. Now, like I said, there is quite a bit of smoothing with this brush, and sometimes it can lag a little if you have too much smoothing on it. So to adjust the smoothing, just click this drop down and lower it slightly, and you'll have a lot more control with the brush. Now, the way I use this brush when I'm watercolor painting is I will trace out the major shapes of a design like so, and then I will fill that in with the paint bucket. And then in my layers panel, I'll use a clipping mask above that layer, and that's how I'll add the rest of the detail with my watercolor brushes. And it just makes for a super clean look because it won't go outside the edges of that solid layer. So that's why I typically use that brush in this pack. All right, now the next brush in the pack is the ink liner brush. This is a great brush for outlining things when you want it to look like you used more of like a traditional art tool instead of that super solid line. So this kind of looks like you're using a pencil or a ink pen to outline something. This pen is also pressure sensitive, so the harder you press down, the thicker your line will be, and the lighter you press, the thinner it will be. Just like the other brush, you can lower the smoothing to create a little bit less lag on that brush. A really great option for creating some visible outlines on a drawing. Our next brush is the Ink Brush 1. Now, this is a brush that looks like a wet paintbrush that you used with some thick ink. So this is a very solid brush, very opaque, and it is also pressure sensitive. So the lighter you touch, the thinner the line, and the harder you touch, the more of a large brush stroke you get. Now, the difference between this one and the Ink Brush 2 is that this brush is completely solid and you won't have any mixing when you put two brushes on top of each other. The other brush is actually a mixer brush. So this is designed for when you want to create a blending of colors together. So you'll see you get this soft blending when you put the brushes together. Now, the lighter you touch here, the less blending you have. So that's how you get kind of like these transition shades. And the harder you press down, the more the color you've chosen will shine through. So just a fun brush for painting. Next, we have the rough liner brush. Now, this is the start of the pressure sensitive, realistic watercolor brushes that come with this pack. The other ones are pressure sensitive, but what I mean here is pressure sensitive blending. Now, with this brush, when you press down hard, you'll lay in the pigment, and the lighter you press your pencil without lifting it, the more of a flow and blend you'll have with the rest of that brush stroke. Now, these brushes are best used with the paper texture. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn on that paper texture, and you'll see that it looks super realistic here. Now, one thing to keep in mind with this brush and all the other ones that have this pressure sensitive blending feature, these work a little bit differently in Procreate. In Procreate, it'll just blend with whatever color you have underneath it. With this, it's gonna blend out to whatever color you have selected as your secondary color. So if I'm working with a white background here, I'll make sure that my secondary color is white. That way, when I press my pencil hard, it's the pigment I've laid in, but as I blend it out, it's the color of the background, and that creates this super soft painted effect. However, if the background was red, let's say, I would select red as my secondary color, and now when I press down, I lay in the color, but the lighter I touch, the more it comes out to be this red color. Usually, I do like to work with the white background, but if you're working like with a completed colored piece, let's say I had like this entire section colored and it was like multiple colors laid together. I know this looks like nothing, but pretend this is like a finished watercolor piece. And let's say I wanted to color a green section here. So I'll choose the color green as my first color. And then for my second color, I will choose that second color. And then I will use the eyedropper at whatever's underneath the section I want to color in. And I will simply press down to lay in the pigment and then lighten the pressure to create this soft blend here. And that way it just looks a lot more natural and you're still getting that blending effect. The next brush we have is the round pointed brush with a thin tip. Now, this is a liner brush, but it is also great for just coloring things in. It's a brush with a lot of smoothing to it. So this can be used for lettering, it can be used for drawing clean lines, basically anything you need it to be. And it has its own built-in texture. So if you don't have a paper texture pulled up, this brush will still have its own subtle texture that you can see here. Now, this brush is also pressure sensitive. So the lighter you touch, the more translucent it is, and the harder you press, the more opaque it is. It also is pretty translucent, so when you run it over itself, you will get this see-through effect, and it makes it really easy to build and blend. This brush also has a bit of its own color blending, so you're gonna do the same thing you did on the rough liner. You will select whatever color is in your background to blend it out. So if my background was pink, I would select pink, and now when I lift the pressure of my pencil, I get more of a pink effect. Like that. Also with this brush, something to keep in mind is that the lighter you press down, the more texture will shine through. So the harder you press down, the more opaque and thick your paint will become, and the lighter you press, the more texture you have. Next is the round pointed brush with a thick tip. So this is another great option for lining anything, creating lettering, or doing any drawings that you need like clean, smooth lines, but you want a little bit of that natural edge. It works similarly to the thin tip version in the sense that when you lower the pressure of your pencil, you get more blending and more texture. This brush also has its own built-in texture, so it's a really great option for a versatile brush. The next brush is the one sharp side brush. This brush has one side, it's like it sounds, one sharp side and one smooth side. So this makes it really good for anywhere where you want to create a bit of an airbrushed effect on one side and a smooth line on the other. So this can be great for creating leaves, creating flowers. Now with this brush, the direction of your stroke determines which side the airbrush is on. So if I go down, the airbrush is on the left, and if I go up, the airbrush is on the right. Like so. Now this brush, it has a lot of purposes, but it can be great for drawing leaves, for drawing wings, feathers, anything where you want a little bit of smoothing going on one side of the brush. All right, our next brush is the cat's tongue brush. This is another liner brush with a lot of versatile uses. So this brush has its own built-in texture and a little bit of messiness. It looks like a super natural watercolor brush. It's got some flow to it and it's translucent. So when you run it over itself, you'll see the lines underneath it. This brush is pressure sensitive and the pressure changes the size of your pencil as well as the messiness of the stroke. So a lot of really great uses to this brush as well. This is probably one of my favorites, and if I don't use the outline work brush to trace a solid shape, then I use this one because it's still really fairly opaque. You can get it very opaque, but the edges just look a little bit more natural. So I would draw the solid shape and then create the clipping mask on top of this. By the way, I've got a lot of tutorials for Procreate on my Instagram. I mean, these are the same brushes I use, so you can apply anything you learn from those videos to Photoshop. So any of the techniques I use. Okay, the next brush is the old round brush. This is another liner brush with built-in texture, but it's pretty smooth and it's a bit cleaner than the others. So less rough of a texture and more transparent, but still pressure sensitive when it comes to the size changes of your stroke. All right, next we have the Realistic Watercolor 1 brush. This is another pressure sensitive blending brush. So I would press down with my pencil to color it and lighten up the pressure of my pencil to blend it. Now this brush, I do recommend you use a paper texture with it. That is what it is designed to be used with. And it'll just give you a much more realistic effect. So again, press down to lay in the color, lighten up the pressure to blend it out. This brush also looks really good if you kind of run it over itself in small strokes. So it just creates like a bit more of a wet edge look. So I will increase the size of my pencil to show you. So let's say I was coloring in a section here. I would stop around this point and then I would create another section like that and just keep running my brush in these small circles. And it'll give you a really high textured wet edge look. And you can decide which parts of it you want to keep opaque and which parts you want to keep transparent. But yeah, that is how this brush works. Again, choosing that secondary color is how you choose what color it blends into. So if I select pink, then when I lighten the pressure of my pencil, it'll become this pink color. Press harder to have more pigment, and press lighter to blend. This brush is also fairly transparent, just so you know. Next is the Realistic Watercolor 2 brush. It works the exact same way, it just is a bit of a different brush. So this one is a bit softer with wet edges. So I think this will be a bit more versatile and then more intuitive to use because it's just a bit smoother. This brush, the Realistic Watercolor 1, is more ideal for when you want some really high and rough texture. Yeah, Realistic Watercolor 2 is gonna be where it's at in my opinion. I really like this one. Now, if you have the Procreate brushes too, you'll notice that these are just slightly different, and that's because these are formatted to work as good as they possibly can for Photoshop and not for Procreate. So different apps, slightly different features. Now, with this brush, again, the secondary color will affect what it blends out into. So press hard to lay in the pigment and press lightly to blend it out. Ta-da! All right, next is the accent brush. This has a slight bit of blending to it. So when you lighten the pressure of your pencil, you'll get that secondary color. And when you press down hard, you will get your initial color. So I would make the secondary color the color of your background. And this will just create kind of a rough, splotchy accent. So a lot of versatile uses for this one, but yeah, it also comes with its own built-in texture. So if you don't use it with a brush, that's totally fine because you'll still get some speckles of texture in there from its built-in texture. Next is the soft blooms brush. This works the same way, but it's just a bit of a variation. So lighter pressure equals more translucent and blending, and pressing down harder creates a more opaque effect. Now this one's a great one for like clouds and treetops and anything like that. Next we have the wet blending brush. So this is a pressure sensitive blending brush. So you will press down hard to lay in the pigment and lighten the pressure to blend it out. This one will get really, really blended. It's like as if, you know, you're using a lot of water with the real thing. That's kind of how I designed it. So you can really go back in and blend out any pigment that you lay down initially. And again, the secondary color determines what it blends into. So a great brush for just like large washes. So this is a great brush for a background or anything like that. Or just basically just laying in like large areas of watercolor. Okay, our next brush is the cloudy texture brush. This brush is an accent brush as well, and it has its own built-in texture. So you can use this to create a little bit of a splash on your work. The secondary color determines what it blends into, and the lighter you touch, the more blending you will have. So with a white background, your brush will look something like this. It also gets slightly bigger the more you press down with it. All right, next is the wet splotches brush. Another accent. This one is really, really great to create these splotchy effects, and there is some slight blending here, so you can soften anything that you add to it, and it'll sort of give you the effect of working with a wet sponge. Press down hard to lay in the color, press light to blend. And again, secondary color determines what it blends into. All right, now the shading brushes are probably going to be your most useful if you like realism. These brushes offer a lot of control and very little blending. So the lighter you run your pencil, the more translucent your color will be. So when it comes to blending with this brush, you really want to work with like building up the different strokes of your pencil and keeping your pressure consistent. And that's how you'll get like a smooth effect here. So let me just show you that one more time. So if I lay in my initial color and then lighten it up, you can see that we could see some of the brush strokes. So I'll just continue doing that and be consistent with the amount of pressure I'm using each time I run my brush over itself. And that's how you'll get this soft gradient. This is such a good brush for shading, and it just offers a ton of control. So with this one, the secondary color does not matter. So you could use any color for this, but yeah, this is really gonna come in handy when it comes to realism and getting the shading right. Now, the smooth shading brush is our next one, and this is the same thing. It has the same effect. It just has a different shape and a different texture. So this is a little bit of a cleaner way to draw. So it's kind of like you're using more of a flat brush. So you might have some more apparent lines here. So just kind of a personal preference thing. And then with this brush, however you tilt your pencil is the direction that your line will go. So you can see that this little icon is twisting as I'm twisting my pencil. So that's how you can determine which way you want this the line of this brush to go. So yeah, another amazing brush for shading. All right, next are the wash brushes. So first we've got the flat wash brush. Now these are heavy blending brushes. They're super, super wet brushes. And when you press down, you lay in the pigment, and lightening up the pressure of your pencil will completely blend it out into whatever your secondary color is. So again, I will choose the secondary color that I want to blend it into. So if I don't want it to be totally white like this, I'll just select, you know, like a slightly lighter purple than what I'm working in. And that way when I'm coloring it, I'll get a much softer blend with the paint. So yeah, it's really important what colors you are choosing here. Oh yeah, this is a great brush for coloring and shading, and it offers a lot of control based on how much pressure you put on. Now these other wash brushes work the same. The soft wash brush is a little bit more spongy looking, and with a white background and a white secondary color, you'll just get a super translucent and light wash. So really great for just like subtle details, subtle coloring, and slowly building up color. So next is the rough wash brush. This is the closest brush I have to working with what would look like a sponge. So it's really highly textured. There's a lot of roughness here. So this is really great if you want a little bit more texture with your watercolor brushes, if you don't want them to be so smooth. So for adding like skin-like texture or anything like that, this is gonna be your go-to. Again, with this brush, the secondary color is really important. And whatever you choose is what it will blend into. So yeah, just make thoughtful choices with what colors you use. Okay, the Bloom on Paper wash brush has its own built-in texture. So if you're not using a paper texture, it doesn't matter. You're still gonna get a lot of texture with this guy. It's a very translucent brush. So running the brush over itself, you're really gonna be able to see all of your brush strokes, even at its most opaque. So it's a super buildable brush, and it's really good if you want to create sort of an accent or like a cloudy effect on any shape that you draw. All right, next is the green brush. So this is like a little splatter of brushes. It's not quite like your splash brush, which you'll see in a bit, but this is a great brush for building up a bit of texture and like grain. So anything that you want to add this splatter texture to, you can slowly build it up by pressing it out harder with your pencil. So the harder you press, the more pigment there is, the more opaque it is, and the lighter you press, the more translucent it will be. With this one, your secondary color does not matter because there's not any blending, but there is a change in the opacity of the brush. Next are the 3 blending brushes. So with these brushes, you can only use them when there's already color on the screen. So let's say I had my smooth shading brush and I had like 2 colors that I wanted to blend together that were side by side. Okay, so if I have these 2 colors I want to blend together, I'll use the Pure Water blending brush, and this is like a smudge tool that I can use to blend these colors together as if I was adding water to the canvas. So you'll just get these super smooth and soft blends with this brush. The harder you press, the more blending you'll get. So pressing down lightly is just minimal, and then the harder you press, the larger the blend. Now the Sharp Lines blender works very similarly, but this one is gonna have more of a sharp effect. So you can see it subtly here. Let me increase the size a little bit so I can show you more. When I run my brush back and forth on this one, it will create this sort of zigzag effect that is perfect for drawing things like the reflection on water. So I'll just simply run my brush back and forth to create that blend. And then I can also turn up the strength on either one of those smudge brushes to create a stronger effect. And there you have it. The next brush is going to be the soft blending brush. This is similar to a wash brush. It just creates this spongy little look, and then your secondary color determines what it blends into. So the lighter you press, the more opaque it'll be, and the harder you press, the more you'll get these cloudy little blooms. So a really great brush for shading and coloring because it's super buildable and you don't have like any harsh edges. All right, and then next is just gonna be our stamps and splash brushes. So first we have the paint drop stamp. So this just creates this little paint drop, and you can lower the size to get like a little bit of a different effect here. Every time you tap this brush, it'll turn into a different direction, so yeah. Next we have this splash stamp, which is designed to be used at a bit of a larger size. So you can make it like this big, or you can make it slightly smaller. But yeah, this is just like a nice accent for like a splashed effect. All right, and then this is like one of my favorite brushes, honestly, and it's just the splash brush. So it just creates this little splash of paint, and it just is a really great accent at the end of a piece. And you can lower the opacity and change the blend mode of it to create like just more texture on the layers underneath it. And yeah, super fun to use. Okay, now our last brush is the Easy Foliage brush. This is a pressure sensitive brush where the lighter you press, the smaller and thinner the line is, and the harder you press, the bigger it is. This is a really easy brush for painting trees. You'll simply start with light pressure and increase it to create some trees. Like pretend that this bottom part here was cut off, like I was drawing these behind something. I'm just drawing in the silhouette of some trees, and you can even go left and right at the top if you want them to be like a little bit crazier. And yeah, here you have it, the Easy Foliage brush. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for ordering my brushes. If you have any questions at all, always feel free to send me an email or DM me on Instagram or TikTok. I'm here to help, so let me know if you have any questions. Thanks again.